Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're unpacking what is, I think, a tectonic shift in technology governance.
It really is.
We're talking about the European Union's landmark legislation, Regulation 2024-1689. Of course, everyone just calls it the AI Act.
Yeah, that's the one.
It was adopted in June of 2024, and it is, without a doubt, the world's first comprehensive legal framework for artificial intelligence.
It's a precedent-setting moment, truly. And the EU's motivation here, it's about more than just trade. It's about laying down harmonized rules to foster the uptake of, and this is their word, trustworthy AI.
But with a big condition, right?
A huge one. Only if that uptake also protects fundamental rights. We're talking democracy, health, safety, the rule of law.
And I assume, pragmatically, they also just want to stop having 27 different sets of rules.
Oh, absolutely. They want to prevent the internal market from fragmenting. So they're building that foundation first for everyone.
So our mission today is to, crack open this massive regulatory project for you. We need to go beyond the headlines and really understand the framework. What is the EU even calling an AI system? What are they banning outright? Because it's just too dangerous. And maybe most importantly, how is risk regulated across the whole chain?
From the developers.
The providers, as they call them.
Right, the providers to the companies actually using the tech, the deployers.
Exactly.
I think we have to start with that crucial definition because it's deliberately broad. An AI system is defined as a machine-based system. It operates with varying levels of autonomy.
And it can learn on the job, so to speak.
It can. It may exhibit adaptiveness, which means it can change even after it's been deployed. And it uses inference from input data to generate outputs.
Outputs like what?
Predictions, content, recommendations, decisions,
Right.
anything that can influence physical or virtual environments. It's written that way to be technology neutral.
To be future-proof.
Exactly. To capture everything from a simple algorithm to a massive foundational model.
Okay, let's unpack this then. The EU's approach, it seemed to begin with a really firm, non-negotiable red line.
It does.
If an AI practice falls into this category, it's just banned. The risk to our rights is deemed unacceptable. This is where the act gets really restrictive.
That's right. The immediate bans, they target systems that exploit and manipulate human autonomy.
So what does that mean in practice?
Think about systems that use, say, subliminal techniques, or systems that exploit known vulnerabilities, like a person's age, a disability, or their economic situation.
And they exploit this to do what?
To materially distort that person's behavior in a way that is likely to cause significant harm.
Okay, so this is way beyond just bad marketing. This is sophisticated psychological manipulation, potentially using data that shows a user is vulnerable at that moment.
Precisely. It's targeting deception that subverts our ability to make an informed choice.
What else is on that banned list?
A very clear ban on social scoring systems when used by public authorities.
Okay.
So this means an AI system can't be used to evaluate or classify people based on their social behavior if it leads to, disproportionate or unfavorable treatment in a totally unrelated context.
Give me an example of that.
Sure. You can't have your access to subsidized housing, for instance, negatively affected because an AI judged your online political activity as undesirable, or your recycling habits.
Got it. So that brings us to law enforcement. This seems to be the most highly scrutinized part of the prohibitions.
It is, and this is the centerpiece of the prohibition list. The outright ban on using real-time remote biometric identification systems in public spaces for law enforcement.
Some things like live facial recognition.
Exactly.
And we need to really underline real time, right? This means a camera scans your face, compares it to a watch list, and gets an ID almost instantly as you're walking by.
That is correct, and that is strictly prohibited. Now, there are exceptions,
Of course.
but the law lists them exhaustively, and they're designed to be almost impossible to use broadly. It's only permitted if it's strictly necessary and targeted for 3 specific objectives.
Which are?
1, searching for specific victims, like in an abduction. 2, preventing an imminent threat to life or a genuine threat of a terrorist attack.
Okay, very specific threats.
And 3, searching for a person suspected of a specific list of very serious crimes. Think murder, rape, illicit trafficking.
That sounds incredibly restrictive. I mean, isn't there a risk that this kind of process could hamper police from reacting quickly?
Well, that procedural safeguard is the entire point. The regulation is crystal clear. Each and every use under these exceptions requires prior, specific authorization from an independent judicial or administrative authority.
So a judge has to sign off on it beforehand. That's a massive procedural hurdle.
It's huge, and if that authority rejects the authorization, even if the police started using it in an urgent situation, the system has to stop immediately.
And the data.
All related data must be discarded and deleted. This whole mechanism, it effectively prevents the widespread, indiscriminate deployment of live facial recognition.
So that makes the distinction between real-time and, say, post-facto analysis really critical, doesn't it?
It's the key distinction.
So if the police analyze surveillance footage from last week to find a suspect, is that covered by the same strict ban?
No. That is what the Act calls a post-remote biometric identification system.
Because it's after the fact.
Exactly. Because the identification happens after a significant delay, it's not considered indiscriminate live surveillance. Now, these systems are still subject to strong safeguards and proportionality checks.
But not the outright ban.
Not the outright ban,
Yeah.
and not that prior judicial sign-off that's required for the real-time systems.
Right. So if an AI system isn't banned, it moves into this tiered structure. The next critical tier is high risk. And this seems to be where the lion's share of the compliance burden falls.
It absolutely is.
So what pushes the system into that high-risk category?
Well, there are two main paths. The first is if the AI system is intended as a safety component of a product that's already regulated by existing EU law.
Like what? A medical device?
A medical device, an aviation system, the core control software for a car. If that product already requires a third-party conformity assessment, the AI inside it is automatically high risk.
That makes perfect sense. If the AI fails, someone could die.
Exactly. The second path is for standalone AI systems used in specific predefined sensitive areas. These are all listed in an annex, Annex 3rd.
And what's in that annex?
Things like the management of critical infrastructure, like our power grids. Systems used in employment, so recruitment, worker monitoring, performance evaluation, and systems managing essential public and private services.
Can you give me a real-world scenario for that last one?
Sure. Think about systems that determine your eligibility for a loan, so credit scoring, or for Social Security benefits, essential housing, insurance.
Okay.
The logic is that if an error or a bias creeps into that system, it can seriously infringe on a person's livelihood or their fundamental rights.
So once a system gets that high-risk label, what are the technical hoops that the providers have to jump through?
There are several mandatory requirements, starting with a risk management system, and this can't just be a one-off assessment.
It has to be continuous.
Continuous. An iterative process throughout the entire life cycle of the AI, identifying, evaluating, and mitigating known and, importantly, reasonably foreseeable risks.
Meaning the provider has to think about how their tech could be misused, even if that misuse isn't strictly illegal.
Absolutely. The second crucial requirement is rigorous data and data governance.
This feels really important.
It is. Systems that rely on model training must use high-quality, relevant data sets for training, validation, and testing. But here's the key part. These practices must explicitly address potential biases that could lead to discrimination.
So how does a company practically do that? How do you address bias without, say, violating privacy laws? That seems like a really tight rope to walk.
It is a tightrope, and the Act acknowledges this. It requires providers to systematically audit their data and models to detect and mitigate bias. And sometimes that involves the necessary processing of sensitive data, like ethnic origin, for the sole purpose of bias detection and correction.
And they have to document everything.
Everything. It elevates data quality and bias mitigation from a nice-to-have best practice to a mandatory legal standard.
That's a deep structural change for AI development teams. What about transparency and human oversight?
Providers have to maintain exhaustive technical documentation and record keeping. We're talking intended purpose, accuracy metrics, cybersecurity measures, all for up to 10 years. And critically, there's the requirement for human oversight.
Well, human in the loop.
A human in the loop. High-risk systems have to be designed to enable human monitoring, to detect anomalies, and to allow for easy intervention. For some systems, like certain biometric tools, that oversight is even stronger.
How so?
It requires verification and confirmation by at least 2 separate human individuals before a match is acted upon.
Okay, let's pivot now from the provider to the deployer. The company or organization that's actually using the high-risk system, what's their responsibility?
The accountability doesn't stop when the system is sold. Deployers, especially public bodies or private entities providing public services, have to conduct a fundamental rights impact assessment, or a FRIA.
Before they even use it.
Before they use it, they have to identify the specific risks the system poses in their specific local context. They are the local accountability layer.
And what about the people affected by the system?
They also have to inform those people that they're interacting with a high-risk AI system and ensure they have the right to request an explanation for decisions made by that system. It brings accountability right to the point of impact.
Okay, so that's high risk, but now we're moving up the scale.
Right. The EU recognized that just regulating the final product isn't enough when you have these incredibly powerful foundational models, the large generative AI systems that can be adapted for almost infinite purposes.
And these are what the Act calls general purpose AI models, or GPM.
Exactly.
So models like GPT, Gemini, Claude, they're regulated at that foundational level, no matter if the final app built on top of them is high risk or not.
Precisely. All GPM providers have baseline obligations, mostly centered on transparency and legal compliance. They have to create technical documentation for this new EU AI office and provide enough information to downstream developers.
So those developers can build compliant systems.
You got it.
What are the biggest transparency obligations for these foundational models? This is what everyone's been talking about.
I think the two most globally impactful rules are about intellectual property. First, EPM providers must have a policy to comply with EU copyright law. They have to specifically identify and respect rights reserved by creators whose content was used for training.
In the second.
Second, they have to make a sufficiently detailed summary of the content used for training the model publicly available.
That is a huge deal.
Yeah.
It's meant to give the world a window into the data that shaped these giants.
It is. And what's also fascinating is how the EU tackles the most powerful, potentially dangerous models, the ones that pose a systemic risk.
Right. How do they draw that line? How do you define systemic?
They use a clear quantitative threshold. A GPM is presumed to pose systemic risk if the cumulative computation used for its training exceeds 10 to the power of 25 floating point operations.
FLOPS.
FLOPS.
And for anyone listening, that number is it's exponentially massive. It's designed to capture only the models at the absolute cutting edge of capability.
The ones that could really destabilize markets or society if they fail catastrophically.
So once a model crosses that astronomical threshold, what kind of testing is required?
The burden increases significantly. These systemic models have to perform continuous, rigorous model evaluation, including documented adversarial testing.
Which is often called red teaming.
Red teaming, yes.
Yeah.
Actively trying to break the model, find its failure modes, identify malicious capabilities before it's ever deployed. They also have to assess and mitigate systemic risks at the union level and ensure superior cybersecurity protection.
I want to tie a bow on one crucial point here because it sets up our final thought. The sources mention a requirement about the output of these models.
Yes, this applies to all GPMs. It's a key obligation regarding synthetic content. Providers of AI that generates deepfakes or other synthetic media must ensure the outputs are clearly marked.
Labeled as artificially generated.
Or manipulated, yes.
Okay.
Potentially using machine-readable watermarks or other technical means. It's a crucial part of building trust in our digital world.
Okay, so to manage all of this, this complex, tiered framework, the EU didn't just write a law. They actually created a whole governance structure to enforce it.
A robust one, yeah.
Give us the breakdown of that new institutional architecture.
So first you have the AI office. It's established within the European Commission, and it acts as the central expert body. It monitors the big GPMs and coordinates all the national authorities.
Okay.
Then there's the EU database. This is a mandatory public registry where providers have to log their high-risk AI systems before they can sell them.
And then enforcement on the ground.
That falls to the Market Surveillance Authorities, or MSAs. These are the national bodies in each country responsible for making sure the high-risk systems sold within their borders are actually compliant.
This all sounds very focused on compliance and control. How does the Act try to support innovation, especially for smaller tech players, for startups?
That's where the concept of AI regulatory sandboxes becomes really vital.
Okay, what are those?
They're controlled frameworks set up by national authorities to foster innovation. They allow providers, especially small and medium enterprises and startups, to develop, train, and test their innovative AI systems.
But under supervision.
Under strict regulatory supervision for a limited time. It's a mechanism for them to learn and to fast-track compliance, to make sure regulation doesn't just crush the smaller players.
And ultimately, for this to work, the stakes for non-compliance have to be high enough that the global tech giants take it seriously. So what's the bottom line on penalties?
The penalties are designed to be globally dissuasive. Non-compliance with the outright prohibitions, that red line we talked about first, can result in massive administrative fines.
How massive?
Up to 35 million euros, or 7% of the company's total worldwide annual turnover, whichever amount is higher.
7% of global turnover. That immediately puts this regulation in the same league as GDPR in terms of financial impact. It forces global attention from every major tech company, no matter where they're based.
Precisely. And for infringing other core rules, like failing to meet the high-risk requirements, the fines drop slightly but are still huge, up to 15 million euros, or 3% of turnover. The structure clearly signals that failing to respect fundamental rights carries the highest financial risk.
So this deep dive really shows that the AI Act is a carefully constructed system. It's all based on potential harm.
It is.
They have the outright prohibited practices. You have rigid compliance for high-risk systems with accountability for both developers and deployers. And you have a specific regime for the general-purpose AI models.
And the fundamental goal all along is to achieve trustworthy AI that is human-centric.
Protecting rights, but also trying to provide a clear path to market with things like the regulatory sandbox.
This legislation really establishes that technology governance isn't a secondary concern. It's the foundation for safe development. And it sets a global precedent by defining accountability across the entire value chain.
That's a great point.
And what's fascinating to me is how the EU has baked in mechanisms for self-correction. Things like the regular reviews that are mandated by 2029, and the ability for the Commission to update the high-risk lists or that systemic risk FLOPS threshold.
So it can keep up with the tech.
The intention is for this to be a dynamic, evolving law, not a static one.
And we'll leave you with this final provocative thought, building on those transparency rules for synthetic content we mentioned. Given that the Act mandates providers of generative AI to ensure that their outputs are clearly marked as artificial using technical means, how effective will these mandated machine-readable watermarks actually be?
That's the question.
Will the technology to strip or counterfeit these digital labels evolve faster than the enforcement mechanism